All right. Well, hey, welcome. I'm here with Joe Moore, leading a We Are Church in Tennessee. And we're going to be having a conversation. I mean, as most of these topics are around something in regard to leadership, but we wanted to talk specifically about like the fighting against the temptation for our hearts as believers first and leaders in the church second to slowly start to, I don't know, lose the love we had at first. And I had asked Joe to have this conversation because that's something that I've seen in him, like in a very intentional effort on your behalf, Joe, to like fight against that. And it seems like some you've identified. I remember being with you at the prayer property in the Bay Area, and somehow we were talking about how you have intentionally made an effort in like connection and relationship in with We Are Church, and you had said something along those lines of, man, I want to, I don't want to put words you could say, but it's something along the lines of like, man, I want to see, identify like people that I see that are filled with faith and like go be around them and be committed to that, because I don't, maybe you could speak to that. What was it you were saying there?
Yeah, just that I had noticed that like who we're around, it matters. If we're just around people who are happy all the time, there's a tendency we're gonna be happier, or disgruntled will be more disgruntled. And in my life, God's really blessed us with a lot of like parents in the faith, grandparents in the faith, almost people that have been married for 50 years, and just great men and women of God that love the Lord, but they're walking consistent lives that um, I don't know, are kind of in line with how Americans would walk a life anyway, just with a lot more purpose and a lot more moral aptitude. So kind of saw that in my life. And when I saw that there were I didn't have a whole lot of faith. I didn't have people who were making true faith choices, giving up everything to do what God called them to. And that was a value that I felt like needs to be a part of who I am. And so in this case, like as to your question, or to the thing that we're talking about, that is one of the things that I want to surround myself with is people who just love people really, really well. When you're around leaders a lot, they learn how to be loving and how to overcome faults and lead a group of some kind, but not necessarily are they like lovers of people. Um, And I mean, some of it's just personality or temperance, but other parts of it are, or temperament, I mean, but other parts of it are it's just hard. It's hard to love people. And I think Jesus, in the last days, lawlessness will increase and the love of many will grow cold, right? That's a reality when you just keep running into brick walls, you just start to slow down a bit because it's hard to keep hitting the same things over and over again. And the American church or Western or whatever is, it's a, we have a lot of people that just show up. And the problem with being a leader is you need more than just people to show up because you can't do everything. You can't run the sound and the camera and park the cars and get the coffee or whatever happens at different places. You can't do all that. So you need people to do that stuff. Um, and if everyone's just showing up, you're in big trouble. Like, so you're constantly trying to get somebody, please show up, please help out. Look at the nursery over here, maybe give some more money. Um, but if you're in a culture where people just show up and leave, like your whole life looks like you trying to get people to do stuff they don't want to do. Or at least that was kind of you know, so maybe it's just my narrow experience, but that's what I saw. So,
Right. Yeah, that's like a real, I guess you're talking about that. I think about how easy it is to start with such faith, like, man, God can do anything, like, and to just be filled with like I think in a healthy way, like a zeal. I mean, obviously I think early on there's some naiveness to, you know, where I look at myself early on, the first couple of years. I remember thinking when I was interviewing to work at a church, uh, I remember I had no thought to ask them any questions.
Hmm.
I just thought, these are believers. Like, this is going to be awesome, man. I get to work for a church with a bunch of Christians. This is going to be so cool. And, how naive. And yet also there's something beautiful in that I don't want to lose, right? Where it's like, oh man, I've had different experiences now and, these last whatever 20 years. And now I know better. And just cynicism can creep in. And just like the way you can look at things like, I know that's not going to work. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. And then you can just kind of settle for, I guess you're kind of describing how it can be sometimes as leadership in the church. You settle for like, I just hope people will be willing to like show up 15 minutes early to help set up chairs or whatever, as opposed to this like, man, God could do whatever. I'm kind of in that, like, as much as I'd love to think I'm filled with faith, some people listen to this have already heard me share, but like my family, we're moving to Cleveland. Felt like the Lord telling us to go, um, moving in 2.5 months from this. And I have to wrestle through a lot of these questions, like doubt will creep in, like, man, is this crazy? And what's God going to do? I don't even know what's going to be happening in Cleveland.
Hmm.
And, faith has to grow in me now because I guess it's like maybe what I'm getting at is there's maybe the muscle I haven't had to flex in a little bit in the same way. There's
Hmm.
different points in my life where it's like a big life shift, like
Yeah.
a move or changing a job, or it requires a big step of faith. And every time there's like this flexing of that muscle. And right now I think I'm going through that where I'm like, Lord, I don't have any idea what's coming in 2.5 months, but I believe, it's like, I hope not a question mark. Like, I hope it's more a definitive. I believe, God, you are going to do beautiful things. And like,
Yeah.
but it can sometimes feel a little bit of a question mark. Like, I think you're gonna, um, so I don't know, but I feel like it's just how easy it is to drift away from that, where early on that was, I'd say, very present in my life.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about exactly what we talked about at the prayer property, or at least what I was trying to get at back then is the same thing, which is if I've been in the same place for a while, and if everyone I know has been in the same place for a while, how am I going to deal with a big change, a big move, a big something? And you don't want to I don't know, you can only be friends or go deep with so many people, but like there's got to be things if I feel prompted to look for something of value, I need to go after that. I need to make that because I need to be poured into by people that are using that muscle, that are actually just made that faith choice yesterday or just moved to Ohio 2 months ago or whatever it is. If we're going to go on the mission field, what are some people who just got back? Who can I talk to? And because it's hard not to create a home somewhere, even like at a great place. And when I think of God, I would say, okay, well, like who's more disappointed than God? I mean, nobody lives up to God's expectation as far as like holiness. So if he's going to have a relationship with us, not like he's surprised or something, but if he's going to have a relationship with us and do it with like true love and even driving to the cross, then it's going to have to be it's renewed by something other than what he sees. Like, it's not just and that has to be in us too, and that's of course the secret to everything is the heart of all those things are with God. So we seek the heart of God because he's the one that has all those traits that we need to do what we need to do. But for God, he's able to look at us with love, um, can't be a hope or an excitement because he knows what's going to happen, but it almost seems like it's there. Like, Joe, come on, you can really do it this time. This time, you can really take a faith step, Joe. I know you can do it. And again, it can't be hope and excitement because that would depend on him not knowing, but it's something like that, that somehow he's looking at us with eyes to say, you can be perfect like I am perfect. You should be perfect like I am perfect, but he knows we can't be. And so there's depth there that we can find somewhere in the heart of God, that we can love people even though they let us down again and again. We can expect something amazing even though the last 4 times it's been okay. So that's what I've been praying about since you mentioned that, is just how do we do it? Like, how do we really keep our heart fresh? It can't just be with other people. It can't just be within myself. It can't just be because of prayer. It has to be like the Holy Spirit doing it in us, I think.
Yep. Yeah, there's definitely some, I've observed within Francis too, where he has that faith where, kind of like you had said, if we could try something 9 times and then on the 10th time, he's like ready to go for it again. Even though the first 9 seemed to fail, it's like, yeah, let's do it, man. If the Lord's with us, it's so easy. I think that's one thing in leadership in the church is you try things and you have hope and faith for them to work out a certain way and it doesn't. And so then, I guess one thing I've been saying recently is, man, we got to be careful how we learn. Like there's a
Mm.
way in which we can learn that is not good, which is obviously we want to learn from every situation, but I see how, let's say you appoint somebody, like send somebody out to pastor a church, like multiply out, and it doesn't go well, right? So then it can be lesson learned. I'm not going to ever send somebody out in that sort of situation. It's like, well, I mean that there's something we should learn there, but I don't think we should necessarily make a rule of thumb based on one situation, right? Because we just kind of learn, like, don't take risk, don't take steps of faith, right? Because it didn't work that last time, and so now I've learned not to do that. I don't know, it's just a very tricky, I
Yeah,
guess.
that's
how,
good.
how do you handle like learning in
Mm.
leadership while not like losing faith?
I think you just described the difference between a child and an adult. Like, my kids do the same. I don't know if they'll ever listen to this, so I'll be careful. The same not so smart things over and over again. And sometimes I just look in a wonderment and say, really? You did that again? Again, you did that? But there's something beautiful about it because they are learning a deeper thing than creating their world around not messing up again, which is what we do as adults. Like you said, well, I sent that guy out. And I was thinking a lot about Paul's letters to Corinthians specifically. I was thinking about this the other day, that if I start a church somewhere and I look at it from afar, so we have the churches in Mazatlan, we are church, Somos Iglesia in Mazatlan. So I look at it from afar, and if I see trouble or something going on, my first tendency is, oh, I don't know, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we need to shut that down. Maybe we need to whatever. But Paul's looking to Corinth and he's seeing some trouble, like some real trouble. But he's not talking about shutting anything down. He's not talking about, he's just talking about how you can't do it that way. But he's not, it doesn't seem to creep in anything that I can read in there that says, well, we're never doing that again. Or I'm not going to put up, I'm never am I going to put this guy in charge, or never am I going to have a guy, whatever. Instead, it just seems like he knows it's there and he's going to deal with what's there, but he's not going to make a plan how never to get there again. And I think that's like a key thing between a kid and, childlike faith and an adult type faith. Um, because if I really think about the way church trends, it doesn't trend more simple, it trends more complicated. And the more online presence, the more visitors, the more videos, the more recordings, the more complicated it gets because, just there's more stuff going on. So you're not going to be able to get less and less help from an already small pool of people. So if we are going to run a good church, we'll just have to come up with a better system like what grown-ups would do. Okay, well, we're going to get a sign-up sheet and we're going to pay people to do this and we're going to fire them if they don't show up. And then we'll have a really good, complicated system. But a kid wouldn't do it that way. He would show up every Sunday and say, oh man, that was messed up. And then they would show up next Sunday and mess it up all over again. But they would enjoy it a lot more than we do. So I think there's something there. I don't know if I'm capturing it or what I'm saying, but it's there in what you're saying as far as an adult and a childlike faith.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was some, you were talking about like, we try to avoid failure, right? That I think really gets at the root of a lot of our issues. And if we're trying to avoid failure, if that's what we feel like we're primarily supposed to do, then yeah, like why take risk? Why not just
Oh yeah.
just kind of do what's safe? And you know, and I think that is part of what I'm wrestling through in this whole moving process is like, gosh, I could totally fail, right? I think we've discerned the Lord's leading in this. It's interesting. Like I feel confident in that this is what the Lord's asking us to do. But then for some reason, I'm also still a little worried. Like, what if it doesn't work out? Which is really highlights like something not healthy in my own heart. Of you know, like because sometimes it's like, man, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and now I'm like nervous. Am I going to make the wrong decision? At this point, it's like I'm pretty sure we're supposed to go, and I believe the Lord will be pleased with it. But what if we don't do it right, or what if it doesn't work out, and what if?
Hmm.
And there's just something that's very uncomfortable in those steps of faith. And I don't know. I don't know for each of us or for anybody listening to this, what steps of faith the Lord might be putting in front of you. But I guess, yeah, it's that encouragement that, we're reading through the book of Acts right now, and there's just so much not controllable in all of it. Yeah, kind of like you're getting at in Corinth. Like, I mean, especially he's playing a church. I mean, he stayed there for a while, but when he's leaving, I mean, it's just outside of his control. And just so much of what's happening throughout the book of Acts is like out of human control. And it really has to be dependent on the Lord. Um, and that's so uncomfortable. And yet we have to press into that. So I don't know, maybe kind of any like final thoughts from you and
I'm gonna tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking of Hosea, and I'm thinking if I told you, hey, I'm gonna go find a wife, Sean, and then I came back with a prostitute, you would probably see that as a failure of
especially
finding.
if you're already married, so.
Yes. Well, he's in a different time. It's fine. Um, but if he wouldn't have found that prostitute and he wouldn't have married Gomer, then really he actually would have failed. And maybe that's it. Like there's a piece of growing up that I care a lot more about what people think of me, and then ultimately I care about what God thinks of me, which on one hand should be helpful. It's helpful to go through the day, I guess, um, interacting with people in a way that's appropriate. That seems like a helpful thing. Whereas my son just interacts with people, no problem at all. But maybe we just take on a lot more responsibility with God than we're ever asked to. And if you are supposed to go to Ohio and be bankrupt and fail miserably in the world's eyes, if you don't do that, you'll be forced to fail miserably in God's eyes. And which is not what you want to do, even more than you don't want to fail in the world's eyes. So the fact that we're attaching those two things and we're using the world standard to determine if we fail or not, I think there's a lot there. But as a final thought, I would like to say that it breaks my heart when I don't love people well, when I don't, when I look back at relationships or things, I think, man, I really did not love that person well, or I really did not do well with this, or I didn't give that guy another chance and I should have. That's what breaks my heart about looking back. So I know that my love has not grown cold yet because of that, or I feel like it hasn't because of that. And I think if I keep my heart there, if I want to be loving to somebody, I need to do things of love to them. And I can't let my heart determine how I feel about Sean, because my heart's deceitfully wicked. And if I let my actions be attached to how I feel about Sean, then I'm not going to love him well. But if I do actions that I know associate with love, I'll lead my heart to love Sean. And then I can keep engaged the way I should. So I think, how do I stop my heart? Is I do things that I should do. And that keeps my heart engaged in loving someone like I should. So
That's good. Yeah, and as you were sharing, I was thinking about, and maybe kind of could be a closing thought for us. We were at a micro church conference last week, and it's just sharing, out of the Great Commission, the and I think we're all pretty familiar with the Great Commission. And in Matthew 28, right, Jesus has appeared to the disciples, and now it's kind of this like, these are in Matthew's gospel, these are the primary words. Like, this is of Jesus after his resurrection. Like, this is the pinnacle of the end of Matthew, and it's all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me, right? That's actually the line before the Great Commission. So just thinking about, as we are going out trying to make disciples, as we're going out trying to be obedient to what God's called us to do, the interesting thing is that there's no, like, we receive that command, but first comes this, like, I would call it like great declaration, which is he has all authority. He has all authority. And so it's so important for us to go out under that, I guess, truth. And then you have the Great Commission, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And then you have the great promise, I would call it, right? Which is, and behold, I am with you always to the end of the age, right? So you have the great declaration, man, I have all authority. And the great promise, I am with you. There is no promise attached to making disciples other than he'll be with us.
mm.
And I was just thinking about that as like, as I am going to Cleveland, and not to make it all about that, but just as we're taking steps of faith unto the Lord, the promise is not in the results. The promise is, I'm going to be with you.
Yeah.
And the truth that we need to rest in is he has all authority. Like, this is all, anything that happens is underneath his sovereign control. And he's going to be with me the whole time as I'm trying to make disciples, but there's no promise attached to how many disciples or how effective it's going to be. And Jesus even says, like, as he sends out the disciples in Matthew 10, I believe it is, but he's sending out like, hey, and it's clear as he's giving them instructions, in some cities they're going to receive him, and in some cities they're not. And he gives them instructions like, man, sometimes you're just going to like essentially fall flat on your face. Nobody's going to listen to you. You're going to feel like a failure. And then he says in that moment, like, kick the dust off of your sandals, like, leave that city. So even there, would seem like a failure, Jesus is pointing out, like, that's not on you, you know, and here's what you do in that situation, because those times are going to come. And so, it's like, did the disciples do better in the cities where people received them as opposed to the cities where people didn't? It doesn't seem like that's what Jesus is laying in front of them. It's like sometimes you'll be accepted, sometimes you'll be rejected. Um, but to keep going, and how do you keep going? I think it's believe in the he has all authority and he's going to be with me, and that's what
That's a
I'm
great
banking
word.
on.
It's a great word, Sean. That's
Yeah.
great.
So yeah, man, awesome talking, Joe. I hope. I mean, I feel encouraged. I hope people as they listen are encouraged just to like keep going forward in faith, for us to not settle, to not start just playing it safe, but to continue forward in faith.